Are elongated skulls real? If so, where do they come from and how does that change human history? Brien Forester, popularly known for being featured on the Ancient Alien TV show, has been researching, investigating, and conducting scientific testing on the elongated skulls of Paracas, Peru for close to 2 decades. Having an academic background with a bachelor's in biology, Forrester brings a unique and professional perspective on the elongated skull phenomenon. In this interview, we'll get into his research, what he thinks is going on with the elongated skull mystery, and also his general thoughts on the state of the world and spirituality. What's up, everybody? This is Esoteric Eddie. Namaste. And of course, today I have the legendary Brien Forester. How you doing, Brian?
Good, thanks, Eddie. How about you?
I'm good. I'm good. Just out here enjoying the Southern California weather. All right. So, for those who don't know you, which I doubt anybody doesn't, but would you mind just giving us a brief background on yourself?
Sure. I was born in the US. I lived most of my life in Canada, but now I've spent the last 14 years in Peru. So here I'm studying, of course, ancient megalithic sites and stuff like that. My interest in this started when I was quite young with a fascination with Egypt through National Geographic magazine, etc. And I got to see Stonehenge when I was 16 before they put a wall around it. So it was totally open to the public. And so that's been my fascination now for quite a few years, as ancient places around the world that are not properly explained by conventional academia.
Okay. Okay. So, you've been studying the elongated skulls for, what is it, 2 decades or 3 decades? How long would you say?
I'd say about 14 years.
14 years. Okay. So, close to 2 decades. Okay. Cool. Cool. Um, So my first question for you is, when did you decide to start looking into the elongated skulls?
Well, I first went to a museum located close to where I lived that was private, and it had a mummified elongated skull. And since I come from a biological pre-med background, I noticed that the shape of it was incredibly peculiar because it didn't look like it was headbound or cradle boarded, but that it was natural in shape. And so that's what started my fascination. And through that, I was able to see hundreds of different skulls, most of which were cradle head boarded, but there were obviously some that appeared to be natural in shape. So that's when the kind of serious study of this began.
Okay, what year are we talking? This is like 14 years ago, I guess. So do you remember the date or like the year?
Um, God, I guess around 2008.
2008. Dang, dude, I was barely in middle school at that time. That's a long time ago. But okay. Why did you decide to start looking into elongated skulls? I know you just kind of mentioned that you were fascinated from a biological standpoint, but was there anything other than it just being an anomaly?
Well, I looked on the internet, for a long time at academic studies of them, and they all said that it was the result of head binding, no matter what culture you were looking at. And the ones here in the Paracas area, again, the oldest ones appear to be natural in shape. And so there's no reference to that possibility in any academic papers that I looked at, which I found curious. So it made me start to suspect that there was a cover up of this subject matter, that all of the academics, you know, developed in an agreement that there's no such thing as a natural elongated skull because it brings up too many, um, questions that they can't answer. So
Absolutely.
that's also why I've been persisting with it, because I refuse to, be lied to or dumbed down by that.
Absolutely. I will get more into that concept a little later, but before then, got a couple other questions. Um, so going off what you just said, what is the oldest skull that you have personally investigated?
Well, we've only carbon dated about 4 of them. The oldest one so far is 2,400 years old.
Okay, wow. All right. Have you had any UFO or spiritual experiences growing up or throughout your life?
Many.
Okay. Any prior to getting into the elongated skulls?
Yeah, when I was a child, I saw ghosts in the middle of the night. I'd wake up and see these people who looked like they were dressed in farm clothes, like from the 19th century, right in front of me, and like semi-translucent kind of things. And then I just fall asleep again. But I saw that 2 or 3 times, and I know it's real because I'm recalling a memory. It's not like I'm making up a story. And then my UFO encounter started when I was on Maui around 1996. I saw a cigar-shaped object about 200 feet long in the air for about 10 minutes that didn't seem to be moving.
Wow. Okay. And do you think that you've had these experiences because they've kind of chosen you, or is it something that started in your family line, or is it just kind of incidental?
I think it comes from my mother's family, very Celtic kind of background. She had all sorts of interesting experiences growing up and through her adulthood as well, which she would talk to me about, but she never understood what it was. But I think it definitely comes from her side of the family.
Okay. Have you ever had any conversations with these beings or this phenomenon?
No, I've never really been interested in that. The
Okay.
same thing with people ask me about seeing UFOs. I've seen quite a few, but when they say, well, have you had conversations or would you like to? I've always been hesitant of having direct contact like that. Being someone experiencing something like a craft or orbs is one thing, but direct communication, I'm still kind of wary about that.
Absolutely. Okay, okay. So when you got into the elongated skulls and you were deep into your research in your early days, what was it like trying to present that for the first time?
Um, well, I tried to discuss it with different archaeologists who refused to get into that discussion at all. We did some DNA study, which had to be done with a Peruvian archaeologist. And when we got the results, um, he was very quiet about the results because they didn't reflect what he wanted. He expected the results to be Native American DNA, and it turns out that it wasn't. So he refused to discuss the subject after that with us.
Okay, are you referring to the recent results that you had?
Um, all of the all of the results went through the same archaeologist.
Okay, yeah, because I do want to get into your recent DNA discoveries, but I was mainly asking, like, in your early days, like what was the first attempt that you made at presenting this information?
Well, quite early on, again, discussion with Peruvian archaeologists, and when of course, I started making YouTube videos about it because the information belongs to the people. It doesn't necessarily belong to academics. So the more I got pushback from academia, the more I would make videos to present to the world because that's who the information belongs to.
Yeah, that's an important point, and especially in today's world where anybody can just set up shop and spread information, it's very important to take liberty in that privilege that we have for sure.
Mhm.
So, how many genuine elongated skulls have been found in general that you're aware of?
Well, in Peru, well, in this part of Peru on the coast, several hundred have been found. There are 300 plus mummies in storage at the main museum in Lima that I know about. And then elongated skulls from this area are found in museums all around the world, like the British Museum, the Smithsonian, etc.
Okay. Now we're going to get into the kind of the realm of conspiracy as you were alluding to earlier. Do you think that the local governments over in Peru are deliberately trying to stop excavation?
Well, yeah, it's very difficult to do excavations here. It goes through a very long process. I've never, you know, I've been acquainted with people who have been tomb robbers in the past, but I've never done any excavations like that because it requires university degrees, etc. Um, I think it's not a question of cover up. It's just a question of lack of understanding that it is a phenomenal thing to study, but they're simply not interested in it.
Okay. Are there any specific people or organizations that have stopped you or discouraged you from looking into this research?
I wouldn't say directly.
Okay, so there's never been like an actual like person in mainstream academia that you had some kind of beef with or something that's kind of discouraged you?
Well, yeah, again, the archaeologist that we've been working with, he doesn't recognize the possibility of any of these being natural in shape. And I've shown him photographs of some very elongated skulls that he's never seen before, including full mummies,
Mm.
like even those of newborn babies, where the head is the size of the torso. And his sole comment is, "That's very interesting." You know, he has
And
no other comments.
who is this guy, if you don't mind explaining? Like, who does he work for?
He works for the government of Peru.
The government of Peru. And is he a Peruvian or is he like American? What?
Yeah, he's a Peruvian archaeologist.
Okay, Peruvian archaeologist. So he's like the main guy that you've been trying to present this to help get this on a bigger scale or bigger platform globally.
Yeah, I've been trying to, and you know, I've known him for quite a long time. And the two questions that I had for him early on were, one thing we know is that these ancient people had red hair,
Yeah.
and it's, you know, and as in normal red hair, it's not like it was bleached or dyed or anything like that. So I asked him two questions. I said, "Can you tell me specifically where the Paracas people came from?" And he said, "No." And then I said, "Can you explain the red hair?" And he said, "No." So
Do,
that's what kind of drew him into working with me. But then when we actually got results, then he backed completely off again.
do you think that he's hesitant because it's like a national pride thing? Like, or do you think it's just simply like, whoa, this is too weird to touch?
Yeah, it's too weird to touch.
Okay. Now, are you interested in working with anybody in the American government to get this information out?
Um, Not really. I don't really want to work with governments on this. I'd rather
Okay.
just present the evidence directly to the people and
Yeah.
let them decide what they think.
Yeah, I like that approach. I like that. Yeah, but I mean, your research is just fascinating, and it completely changes human history, and it needs to be more involved with mainstream science and archaeology. So to anybody watching out there, definitely check out his videos and his information and help get this knowledge out there. All right. So you recently received some DNA results from some of the elongated skulls. And can you explain that process, like how many you tested, what testing sites you used, and the results of those DNA testing?
Well, we did two major studies. One involved 18 different skulls, um, and samples were taken by a crew that came down from the United States. There were a crew of 5 people. So one was an archaeologist, one was a filmmaker, one was the director, one was a forensic person, and another was an assistant. And so they came down with all of the equipment they required, including full body suits to wear to make sure there was no contamination, you know, gloves and masks and headgear, etc.
And what year was
And
this happening?
that was about 7 years ago.
Okay.
And so they took, I think, about 100 samples in total, and they
100
applied through
samples
the,
as in 100 skulls, or 100 samples from a number of skulls?
yeah, 100 samples from 18 skulls.
Okay.
And so they did the proper thing. They went through the Ministry of Culture here in Peru to get the proper paperwork. But the permit process took 3 years to complete. But they were able to come down, take the samples, and take them back to the US legally. And then the samples were sent to 3 universities, one in Canada and 2 in California.
Okay, so that was 7 years ago. And when did you get the results of that experiment?
About 4 years ago, because
About
the
4 years.
process, the process took 3 years.
Okay. Okay. So 4 years ago. So for 4 years, you've had this, you've had the results.
Mhm.
And what were the results, genetically speaking, as far as the haplogroups and where these skulls actually originate from on this Earth geographically?
Okay, well, of the 18 skulls, 2 of them were um, maternal haplogroup B, which is consistent with Native American people from this area. And then 2 of them were listed as unknown, as in the computer program couldn't match with any known human DNA. And then the rest of them were related to elongated skulls found around the Black Sea and Caspian Sea area of Eurasia.
Okay, dang, that's pretty fascinating. So 2 of them were uh, from that area, and then the rest were
Mhm.
all scattered around. Um, where do you think that the Paracas elongated skulls peoples are originally from, if we could say like a single source?
Well, that's the big question, because since these skulls are only, 2,000 to 2,500 years old, uh, their difference isn't the result of evolution, because evolution takes hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years. So they suddenly appear around the Black Sea area, and then soon after that, they appear on the coast of Peru. So, I'm open to anything. It could be that they do have an off-world connection of some kind.
Okay. Um, yeah, I'll get into that in just a little bit as far as the off-world theory. So, have you investigated any of the elongated skulls from Crimea or the Black Sea area?
No, I haven't been able to because of COVID. So I was
Oh,
planning on going to that area about 2 years ago, but this whole thing has shut everything down.
okay. And to my understanding, I read in one of your books that the second largest elongated skulls come from that area. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're almost identical looking.
Okay, so we're talking 2,500 years ago, so like about 500 BC, these skulls originate from, correct?
They seem to be, yeah.
Okay. Um, Now, do you think that these peoples are linked in any way to the biblical Nephilim?
Some researchers believe that. L.A. Marzulli, who I worked very closely with, that's his belief.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know. The area of the Nephilim is the Levant area, which is like Israel and Lebanon, and this is more around the Black Sea. So there's quite a difference in terms of actual location difference.
I see. I see. Now, are you familiar with Dr. William Ryan and Walter Pittman's work from the early
No,
2000s?
no.
Okay, I'll give you a brief rundown. So they're geologists from the Columbia University, Dr. William Ryan and Dr. Walter Pittman, and they put together a theory in the early 2000s through the form of a book, I believe, and it's called Noah's Flood. And what they realized was that in 5600 BC, the Mediterranean Sea rose due to glaciers melting, and for 2 years, about the total of 20 times the Niagara Falls fell into the Black Sea. And also explorer Robert Ballard, who was the famed discoverer of the Titanic, found in that area a building that was 7,500 years old, about 300 feet below the Black Sea. So with all that being said, they realized in the early 2000s that there was a massive flooding of the Black Sea area, and that there used to be a civilization that lived way underneath there. So I was thinking like maybe there's a connection there with the Black Sea, the Crimea area, and these elongated skulls, and the Nephilim and the flood and so on. And the timelines are a bit skewed, with the 2,500-year-old skulls and the this 5,600 BC raising of these seas. But I was thinking there could be a connection there with all of that going on, and then maybe that's what caused these Paracas people to, or elongated skull people to migrate. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it could be if it's true that the sea level of the Black Sea was much lower um, earlier, like the time frame you're talking, then it could be that their ancestry goes much farther back in time than 2,500 years ago, and that those that could move to higher ground as the water level was rising, and then eventually had to leave the area in total and find a new homeland in order to stay, survive.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that we find red-haired people in the Tarim Basin area of China, right? Like the Tokharians and those type of people. What do you have any information or any thoughts on the red-haired mummies of China? And are they connected to the elongated skull people?
Um, well, the red hair is a connection. I believe that those people found in China were more Celtic of origin, but of course the Chinese government covers up a lot of this information because it doesn't fit in with their history. They're more interested in their genetic bloodlines rather than the possibility of anybody else being there earlier on. The same thing with the pyramids that have been found in China that, now they've decided to turn them into um, areas to grow trees in order to hide them from satellite imagery. So, China's a classic country of covering up historical inconsistencies.
Absolutely. Now, so what are your thoughts on what might have caused these Paracas people to die out or fizzle out?
Well, on the coast of Peru, what happened was that the area a little more than 2,000 years ago was like savanna area of Africa. It was grassland. And then over the course of time, it began to become more and more desert. And a group of people called the Topara moved from the south, or sorry, from the north, and invaded the Paracas area and took over the land. It was very rich agricultural land. So these people took over that area, and it seems that they wiped the Paracas people out and took over their territory. And they're the people that we now call the Nazca culture.
Okay, so it was just kind of like a genetic degradation, I guess, eventually over time that just kind of wiped out their genes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What happened was there was interbreeding between the original Paracas and local people. But over the course of time, the elongated skulls began to shrink in size. And so that's when they started to do the head binding to maintain the shape, because it was the nobility that had the elongated skulls, not the common people. So that's what happened you notice over the course of time that the skulls become smaller and smaller and smaller. They're deformed more and more through head binding. And then by the time you reach the height of the Nazca culture time period, they don't exist anymore. And the red hair disappears as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as far as the extraterrestrial connection, what kind of makes you think that that might be a possibility?
Well, again, evolution is not a rapid process. And so for these people to appear, say even 3,000 or 4,000 years ago and then disappear 2,000 years ago, that you can't account for those anatomical differences based on standard evolution. So that's why I'm open to the idea that they came from another part of like they came from off planet for some reason, and then dominated the area, but then were more or less taken down by the rise of the Nazca people.
Are there any local legends that you came across that kind of bring light to that theory?
Well, unfortunately, there's very little known about the Paracas culture because, again, they died out 2,000 years ago. There are no descendants of them. So all we have left is their mummies and their skeletons and their artifacts. Their god was called Khan, and that's where we get Kon-Tiki from. But he's described as a flying being with red hair.
Sorry, this is the god of the Nazca or the Paracas?
The Paracas.
How do we know that that's their god?
Just from dating of the textiles and local stories.
So his name is Khan, and he was a flying person with red hair.
Right.
Are there any depictions of him, or is it all just textual?
Oh no, lots of depictions of him in textiles.
Well, that's pretty interesting. And what else do the legends say about him? Do they say like where he came from? Did he do anything while he was here?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Yeah, so my next question was going to be like, do you think that any of these people still exist in any way, but or have they just completely died out?
Well, it's probable that when the Nazca were invading the area, that some of the Paracas escaped and they moved inland to the city of Cusco that we call Cusco now, which was the Inca capital, and that they were part of the ancestry of the Inca because the early Spanish explorers described tall, light-skinned, red and blonde-haired people walking the streets of Cusco. And so when they asked the local people who were they were told, those are the last of the Wiriko-chan, the ancient ones.
Hmm.
So that bloodline seems to still continue to a very small extent, even in modern times, because occasionally when I was living in Cusco, I would see, young local people walking the street with red hair, like dark red hair. That doesn't fit in with the normal ancestry of people being black-haired if they're native people.
Yeah. And do you think that this genetic group of people, do you think they go back to like the Atlantean era or the Atlantean legend?
Some people say that's true.
Yeah, and I asked that because of course, I just released a documentary on Tibet, and the Nazis, they were fascinated with Tibet and the whole idea of Agartha, and which is tied to Shambhala, which is actually a Tibetan legend. And it's just interesting how like the whole Indo-European theory and the Nazis and the red hair and the Aryan race of white people with blue eyes and all that, it's all kind of connected in a weird way. So I'm just wondering if these elongated people have any connection with that.
Yeah, I really don't know. Of course, there are also depictions in Chinese and Japanese art of elongated headed people, from deep antiquity.
Yeah.
I think they're called the immortals or something like that, but you still see them in some modern sculpture. They have these depictions of people with very large heads.
Yeah, I posted like a meme recently about Jacob Rothschild. He kind of has that elongated head look.
Yeah.
What do you think? Is he Nephilim, or he's just got a big head?
No, he's probably descended from a noble bloodline, and he could be what's left of that ancient influence of having elongated heads. Of course, a lot of people have contacted me about that, sent me photographs of him, you know.
Yeah. Have you brushed shoulders with any of these royal Illuminati type people amongst in your life or in your academic journey?
Um, not that I can think of, no.
Okay, so you've been featured on the Ancient Alien show plenty of times, correct?
Mhm.
What was that like? Like, as far as when were you on the first season, or what season were you initially on?
I think it was either season 2 or season 3. So I've been on, I think, 24 times now.
When did you get like did you hear about the show before it was aired on TV officially, or like did you hear about it after it was aired and got invited on?
Well, when I was still living in Canada, I was watching season 1. And then all of a sudden, it was either season 2 or season 3. I was spending time in Peru, and I was contacted by one of their producers about, ancient mysteries of Peru. And they hired me to be their fixer, which is the person that organizes hotels and stuff like that. And then they said, well, we might have you on camera. And when their expert, who was supposed to come from the US, didn't show up, the director decided that I would be on camera. And he seemed to be quite impressed by my ability to speak confidently in front of the camera. So I've been on ever since.
That's pretty cool. And by the producer, are you talking about Mr. Burns, I believe was his name?
No, he was the actual owner of Prometheus Entertainment.
Burns
But
was.
yeah, I've gone through different producers and different directors from that company.
Yeah, I went to the first ancient alien convention back in like 2013, 2014. So I got to meet him. He was kind of an interesting guy, but and I got to meet RIP Jim Mars. That was pretty fun, the first ancient alien convention. But man, so how would this information of these elongated skulls change human history if it became mainstream?
Well, it would add another wrinkle to our history um, that, again, academics don't want to look at. So that's why I've been almost like the lone wolf in the wilderness doing this work. I never plan to give up on it. It's just for the last couple of years, it's been difficult to get much of anything done for obvious reasons. But I live in the area where the largest elongated skulls in the world have been found. They're in one cemetery that's only about 20 acres in size. And so, and I have lots of local contacts here of people who, possibly could bring me more samples of things in the future. So I'm in the perfect location to do this kind of work. I have connections with all sorts of different people who could help me with doing things like more DNA testing if I wanted to do that. So, I'm just being patient with what's presently going on and see how this can move forward in the future.
Yeah, I like that. Um, have you had any experiences while you've been out there as far as like, UFOs or paranormal stuff?
Where's that?
In Peru?
Oh yeah, quite a few.
Would you like
Uh,
to talk about that for a bit?
sure, I've had quite a few from the house, where I'm at right now at night, either from the south or from the north, seeing glowing lights, orb shapes. One was a cluster of 12 together, which I saw for about 10 minutes. Others were pulsing lights that would come towards me, then suddenly stop, and then start moving back again. Another one was what looked like a glass ball with a yellow gold light or plasma inside of it that went right in front of me, about 100 yards in front of me, going from south to north. Also at Lake Titicaca, we've had sightings actually in the daytime of
Really?
orb-like shapes.
Do you have any video or like photos of this stuff?
No,
No.
no.
What do you think these things are interdimensional? Are they from our realm, or what are your thoughts on where they are coming from?
No, I think they're extraterrestrial, and
Yeah.
I think the reason why I've had so many sightings is because they know that I'm interested in them and they want to show me that they do exist. But like I said, I've never wanted to have direct contact with them, but since they did appear quite a few times. I think I think they were showing me on purpose that they were there.
Yeah, it seems like people who have experiences have had them when they were kids, and like they kind of just follow them. From what I gather, I've listened to a lot of people's stories, and it seems like it always starts when they're kids, and they're chosen young, and then they continue to follow them throughout their life.
Hmm.
I have not had an experience that I know of. I mean, I've had like paranormal stuff, but no like UFOs or alien type things. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I don't know. But did you ever meet Zechariah Sitchin?
No,
No, no. But you're familiar with his work.
sure.
Okay. Do you think that there's any connection with what he thought of as the Anunnaki with the elongated skulls?
I don't know. I tried to read his book, 12th Planet, and I got to about page 12 and became disinterested. So, he's a very controversial figure. Some people think that he knew how to translate very well. Others think that he was a complete fraud. And there are others who are in the middle. So, there are a lot of people who studied Sitchin's work. I'm just, David Hatcher Childress, of course, is one, but I've never found his work that fascinating, to be honest.
No, yeah, that's chill. Like what about it made you disinterested?
Well, when he talked about this planet that, reappears every was it Marduk or something that reappears every 3,000 years or
Nibiru,
something?
yeah.
Yeah,
Nibiru.
right. I kept thinking, well, all of our planets have a very specific orbit around the sun. So they have constant contact with that solar source. So if this other planet has a 3,000-year journey, how does it maintain its heat or whatever as it's making a deep loop away from the sun and coming back, unless it is producing its own heat or energy? So that's kind of where I thought, well, this is, this I can't follow the logic here.
Okay. Yeah, I know. I grew up being like, a fan of his when I was younger. And then, but now I've kind of matured more and I have my own nuanced critiques of him as well. But yeah, the whole Planet X stuff, I was freaking out about that when I was a kid. I thought it was real and everything. And it's funny to see people come across that for the first time and freak out. Like, for example, my friend's roommate or slash landlord, she like got into all this stuff later on in life. She was like, I don't know, 40 or something. And this was a few years ago. And she would just always be coming in the room, like barging in the room and be like, you guys, like Planet X is coming back like next week. Like we need to prepare, like
Uh,
just freaking out. We'd be sitting in his room, admittedly kind of like, smoking a little bit of the good old cannabis, just enjoying ourselves. And she just barges in and just starts talking about Planet X is coming back next week, like prepare. And I would just kind of laugh it off like, no, it's not coming. I can tell
uh,
you that, you know? But man, so why do you think that officials, other than the archaeologists that you've worked with, don't want this information to get out?
well, it goes against their paradigm. It goes against the standard story of history. So that's why even with the work with the megalithic stuff that we know is much older than the culture is said to have made them, it's inconvenient truths.
Yeah.
But people are waking up to it. So that's why the internet is important, and YouTube and stuff like that, for being able to show the evidence to whoever wants to look at it, and they can make up their own mind as to what they're seeing. But
Yeah.
I've got a growing audience, and there are many people younger than me coming and looking at the same stuff with their own audience. So it's a growing phenomenon. It can't be slowed down or stopped.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely. It seems like the old world institutions are starting to die out, as things become decentralized. And
Yeah.
speaking of decentralization, just a random question here. What do you feel about like Bitcoin and all this metaverse stuff and how that we're like advancing into the age of AI?
Well, I honestly, I don't trust cryptocurrency, to be honest with you, because it's way too volatile. Now it's dropped by half or something, and people say, well, it'll go back up again. I just, it's too volatile a thing for me. And AI, I find to be quite scary. I'm not looking forward to it. My
Okay.
computer and my phone are intelligent enough for me, but I don't use any of the services like Siri or anything like that, because I don't want an interface with like direct interface with artificial intelligence.
Yeah, it's definitely getting pretty wild, and I can see a pretty dystopian future not that far ahead,
Mhm.
but I don't know, who knows, man. Have you sorry, what was my question? Oh, what do you feel as far as like another random question, but I'm sure the viewers will appreciate it. What are your views on like secret societies as far as like the Freemasons? Are they up to no good? Are they ruling things, or are they just a historian geek club?
No, there are definitely organizations which are alive and well today, which have undue influence over us. I don't want to bother naming names because people will already know what they are. But there's a little town in Switzerland called Davos where a lot of stuff goes on, and I think there's too much intrusion into our lives. They're getting more and more control over what we can and cannot do. They're too far involved in stuff like banking and stuff like that. So I'm trying to stay away from that as much as possible.
Okay. Have you had any experiences that kind of just like that made you want to stay away from it, or is it just kind of you just being wise to stay away from it?
Yeah, I think just being wise to monitor, but not to get involved.
Yeah, yeah. I grew up when I started getting into all this information. I was more political, especially in high school and post high school. I was more political with how I approached this, esoteric information. But I've since then like stopped being political, and I'm just trying to more focus on historical facts, but trying to awaken the minds and break the paradigms and free us from the institutional slavery through education. Like
Mhm.
some of the stuff that you do, I think is very important towards that goal, like because one of the ways that we are enslaved, as you can say, is through the institutions of religions and history and science. So the more and more we get information like yours out there, the more and more people can start breaking the paradigms that they're in and realizing that this life is miraculous and that there's so much more going on.
Mhm.
But okay, so yeah, just seeing if I had any other questions. Is there anything else that you want to add to say to the people as far as what you're going to be working on in the future, or what you're going to be excited to share within the near future?
Um, well, I'm open to new experiences. I'll be touring with a group in Peru next month from different parts of the world, exploring ancient sites in Cusco and the elongated skulls on the coast and stuff like that. So another way to educate, more people. And hopefully conferences will start up again. We've had none to go to for 2 years, so hopefully all of this, stuff we've been dealing with is coming to an end, and the fear will end in regards to this, and we'll be able to get back to normal life. I think the power of our positive thought is more powerful than these dark forces that are trying to keep us down. So the more that people awaken, the more we can move forward in life and not go to a new normal, but back to actual normal.
Yeah, I like that. Have you ever done psychedelics?
Yes.
What have you done?
LSD and ayahuasca.
Okay, okay. When did you first start have your first trip?
Uh, about 15 years ago, I think. I've only tried LSD once, and I didn't find it particularly pleasant or bad. I also did. I did peyote once as well, and that was an awful experience. But ayahuasca was very eye-opening.
Okay, and why so, if you don't mind sharing?
Well, I was told by the people that I was going to do it with, to have a specific intent, specific questions to ask inside your mind as you were going through the process. And so I did that. I prepared for a couple of years before I did it. And it was incredibly altering in a very good way. It helped me to get on this new path of studying these ancient sites and things like that. Allowed me to get in contact with people who had the information about them, and with the elongated skulls and things like that. So it was a very positive experience.
That's cool, man. That's cool. I'm sure, have you met David Icke?
Yeah, I did actually.
Okay. What are you guys close or cool or just acquaintances?
I don't know. I met him once. I met him at the Mexico City airport on the way to Acapulco because we were both going to a conference there.
Mm.
So I was able to get into a short conversation with him. I've watched, probably 100 or more hours of his work over the course of time. So very much respect, not all of the work he's done, but I respect a lot of the early work that he did, especially.
Yeah. So what do you think? Reptilians real or no?
That part, that's not part of the stuff that I was interested in, but a lot of his historical stuff, again, about ancient bloodlines and secret societies and, the true history of humanity and stuff like that, I found very fascinating.
Yeah, I say the same thing. When I got into them as a kid, I mean, I love the reptilian stuff too. I don't really, adhere to that theory anymore. But yeah, I think he's fascinating when it comes to like being able to like name names and trace these lineages back to certain dates and stuff like that. That's where his forte is for sure.
Right.
What about his theory on the Saturn and the moon kind of keeping us trapped into this like three-dimension or this very limited sensory perception of reality?
Yeah, I don't know about that.
No.
I think you're limited by you limit yourself. So
Okay. What about the simulation? That's a huge thing going on right now, a huge topic. People are starting to feel like as if we live in a simulation. Do you have any thoughts on that?
not really. I find reality very real. So
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I feel like well, really, it's kind of like this goes back to this Platonic idea, right? Of like
mhm.
forms. Are you familiar with like Gnosticism and the archons and that stuff?
Yeah, I've studied a little bit of that.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of a revival of Gnosticism and Platonic ideas about like this reality is not the real reality. There's like another real reality, and we're kind of trapped here by the archons or Yaldabaoth or whatever. But okay, okay. Dang, I feel like I had a question, but I forgot. So you've met David Icke, you've done psychedelics. Oh yeah, yeah. I wanted to go back to the idea of you having this obstacle of dealing with this archaeologist who doesn't want to face the fact of the elongated skulls. And you mentioned that you don't have any interest in involving yourself with governments as far as getting this information out. You feel like just getting it out there to the people is good enough.
Mhm.
But yeah, so other than this archaeologist guy, has there been any other like strange negative comments or threats from people in mainstream academia towards your work?
No, just basically being ignored is what's been happening.
Okay, is there anybody that you reached out to that you were excited to reach out to, like, oh, like I definitely want to get this information out to this organization or this person that specifically ignored you?
Not that people have been ignoring me, but I am actively working with people who want to move forward with the subject. So that gives access to DNA laboratories and things like that. So, there's no problem with that. You don't have to go through governments to do this.
Yeah.
And you can't go through government museums, but what you can do is deal with private collections of artifacts. So that's what we're looking for.
Do you think there's stuff being hidden from us in the Vatican libraries?
A lot.
A lot. Anything pertaining to this subject, like elongated skulls and
I think probably alien artifacts and all sorts of things. Yeah, I think a lot of there's been a lot of plundering, especially in the Americas, by the Spanish and the Portuguese and other people, and that a lot of stuff like taboo stuff has wound up in places like the Vatican, the Smithsonian, the British Museum, never to be seen again.
Damn. Do you feel like religion is do you think what are your views on religion? Is it a sham? Is there some truth there? What's going on with like Judeo-Christian mainstream religion?
Well, I think the Bible is actually becoming more and more of a historical record. The more archaeology that's done, especially in Israel, the more that they're uncovering sites that show you that certain people like King David did exist at the time frame that the Bible says he exists. So that's quite a fascinating field of work. So yeah, I recently I studied the Bible quite a lot and find it increasingly to be a historical record of that part of the world.
Yeah, I agree. That's actually kind of like my expertise, I guess, is comparative theology, specifically with the Judeo-Christian world. And I just recently published a book on the concept of Lucifer and kind of like tracing that back to how far it goes. And it was really just a misconception all along. You know, Lucifer never really existed in the Bible. It was a later like Hellenistic idea that brought it forth. But yeah, what I found is like, yeah, like the Bible, for example, the Old Testament was written um in like 600 BC or whatever, but it was actually borrowing from a lot of these old world like Canaanite, Assyrian, Ugaritic cultures. So in a sense, it's like the Old Testament is borrowing from these old world religions. So really, like all these stories are going back to like Sumer,
Mhm.
right? Like the Chaldean Genesis, and the idea with like the plurality in Genesis with the word Elohim. So I agree with you. I think that there is some historical truth there. It's just a little, just a little altered, right? Because it's also very poetic and spiritual and a moralistic kind of teaching type thing.
Mhm.
But and what do you think? Do you think that a lot of these Old Testament stories are actually going back to Sumer?
It looks like a lot has been adopted from that. Yeah, the same thing with the virgin birth supposedly shows up in Sumerian texts.
Yeah. So I mean, if it goes back to Sumer, right? Like for example, the flood story in the Bible is one God, just deciding, I'm gonna flood the world, but I'm gonna save, this one family. We now know that that story was borrowed from the Sumerian tales, where it's not one God but two gods, Enki and Enlil, deciding this dilemma. So with that being said, I mean, is the simplifying of the Bible, was it done deliberately to control us, to kind of just simplify things and be like, yo, don't ask questions, it's one God, it's one world, it's one government? Or what are your thoughts?
Well, the only way I look at the Bible is a historical record of the area of the Levant, and that it contains some very good guidance about how to live a proper life. That's more than anything that I get from it. So
Yeah.
whether it's the original story or has been adopted is probable, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Even if we're reading the Sumerian legends, I mean, the Sumerian legends are fascinating stuff too. I mean, and they're very moralistic tales that are allegorical and just kind of show you the hidden wisdom, within how to live a proper life. But yeah, man, fascinating stuff. This has been a good time. It's been a
Thank
fun
you.
time. Do you want to give the people your information, where they can find you and how they can get involved with your work?
Sure. My website is hiddenincatours.com, and that's where everything is um, about me if you're interested. Look, there are videos and books and interviews and photographs and all sorts of stuff's in there. Almost most of it is free. So then there's the tour aspect of it. So that's where I post tours when I'm going to be going to different places where people can join.
Absolutely. Actually, I did have one more question. So you've mentioned that you've experienced paranormal activity, ghosts and strange things like that, and you alluded to the dark forces. When you come across, spiritual negative energy, if you ever have, or just negative energy in general out there in the world, what do you personally do to combat these dark forces?
Um, well, purification with sage or cedar, or there's a substance called Palo Santo, which is a tree, whose wood you can burn to clean the air and energy in your house, that kind of thing. And I'm connected with a number of wisdom keepers in the area of Cusco in Peru. And so whenever I go there, we meet up and we do rituals in order to do purification of ourselves in order to advance, to move forward, to learn more, and to share what it is that we are, the knowledge we carry.
Absolutely. Another question, actually. Sorry, they're just kind of popping in now. Do you think that the Paracas people were what's your view on how they actually were as a people? Were they spiritual? Were they benevolent, or were they like these ravaging, giants?
They appear, from the little we know, it appears that they were quite a peaceful people. They carried high knowledge. They were probably very psychic. I've never seen an artifact that you can specifically call a weapon.
Yeah.
But like a spear isn't necessarily used for killing people. It could be for hunting, or a hammer could be used for building a house, not necessarily for whacking someone on the head to hurt or kill them. So there's no evidence that they were violent, but the Nazca people definitely were violent. It's depicted in their art.
Mm,
So
okay.
they were a violent people that took over a peaceful people.
Okay. Another question here. So, do you believe in the idea of that there's an agenda to push us into a one world government, the new world order? And if so, do you think that we're in the early stages of that? Are we in it now? What's going on with that?
Yeah, I think we're in the early stages of it, and it can be stopped. But yeah, I mean, that it is a fear to some degree that I have, that we're being funneled into something that is not progressive to our spiritual evolution.
And how can that be stopped?
Just personally not getting involved in any of this stuff that they're trying to push.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Right, out of sight, out of mind. Focus on the better things.
Mhm.
I dig that. Cool. Well, Brien, thanks for hanging out. I'm sure everybody's gonna love this. And shout out to everybody who's watching. Definitely go check out Brien's work and his information. It's phenomenal. Like he said, he's been doing this for 14 years. He's a giant in the esoteric community, in the truther community. I mean, I've been following your stuff since I first got into all of this back in, yeah, about almost 15 years ago, man. Honestly, yeah. I started getting into all of this stuff back in like 2008, 2009. So,
Mm.
yeah, I've been following you for a long time as well. Hey, everybody, thank you for hanging out. Go check out his stuff. Go check out my stuff. And peace and love. Namaste. All right. Anything you want to say to the people before we sign off?
Not really. Just thank you for watching, and you know, please have a look at my YouTube channel if that's of interest to you.
Cool, cool. All right then. Well, peace. What up, everybody? Hope you enjoyed that. Definitely got more interviews in the works. Go check out the recent documentaries. Follow me on Instagram at Esoteric Eddie. I post other content on there that you don't see on here as well. And go to esotericeddie.com for some interesting merch. Peace.